I think maybe SIDA has started a revolution without knowing it has.
Shifting the power to me means that the communities that we work with participate in and make all the decisions about projects that affect them. But it also means that they participate in the design of those projects.
It means looking at people who have been affected either by injustice or people who are marginalized and taking the power from those who make the decisions that affect these people.
Shifting the power is about challenging the inequities in our systems and relationships, both individual, nationally, globally. It's challenging ourselves to establish new ways of working that are racially just, and it's about taking collective responsibility for redressing the power imbalances that have come about from past historic harms.
Shifting the power is important because it ensures that the rights of communities and the rights of individuals are recognized in developing strategies for community development and national development and even global development.
Seeing power differently. So seeing power as residing with groups that are traditionally considered to be powerless or marginalised, and actually seeing that the knowledge of communities, Indigenous communities, disabled communities, as having power.
Really just ensuring that the power for change or for seeking solutions lies within the communities most affected by the issues.
At a time of potential political change, we felt it was important to set out some practical, positive measures for what global sustainable development could look like.
We were also trying to look across basically all aspects of global affairs, from trade and defence through to international development. These conversations are not new. So feminist movements, anti-racist movements, anti-colonial movements have been having these kinds of conversations for decades.
The UK government should acknowledge its historic wrongdoings and injustices because it's the first step towards reconciliation. It sets the tone for the way that we work together moving forward. There's been oppression, there's been violence, many lives have been lost.
This has been, generational hurt. The generation that is currently on now needs to hear this acknowledgement very publicly, very strongly, just so we can start the healing.
So some of our policies, for example, include new economic approaches, like looking at debt cancellation, tax injustices, and trade reforms.
Debt cancellation and debt relief initiatives are very important, particularly for lower income countries, because this allows them to shift their focus to areas which otherwise would not have adequate funding, such as gender equality, education, health. So where these initiatives take place, then countries are able to take a more holistic approach.
The national government will disburse funds to county governments to run their own development for devolved functions. If money that is available at the national level is reduced significantly through debt repayments, it means there is a lesser amount available for what is going to the devolved counties. This has a knock-on effect that a mother who wants to go to the local hospital to get checked, she will get there and will not find the medication required.
There is a UN Convention on Tax that governments across the global north resist signing up to, and the UK government could be a leader in that space and push for global reform on tax.
Our policies include promoting better joined-up thinking in government. So, for example, encouraging a Business, Human Rights and Environment Act, because that would ensure that those that we are working with are ensuring that there's social justice in the whole of supply chains.
We see great contradictions within our global system, where we tend to give with one hand and take with the other. We see that playing out in places like Gaza and Yemen, where arms sales from the UK government to the governments of Israel and Saudi Arabia are the main causes for the need for the provision of humanitarian assistance. That's a contradiction that we could end overnight, but we don't.
We've also tried to bring in how it's really important to respect those that we are working with, ensuring that communities are part of the design and implementation of any projects, And we're proposing that we should fund networks and fund movements directly.
We find value in having really targeted funding streams. For example, disability inclusion is funded as a unique entry point, then it raises that profile, it raises the spaces and platforms, and widens the scope of how diverse our international development can be.
If this funding isn't accessible to the communities that it seeks to serve, then it ends up giving way to people who don't have the best interests of the community at heart. If there are to be initiatives that benefit us in the Global South, us particularly feminist movements, then there's a need to shift the power and to ensure that we're part of these conversations.
Honestly, it's really great that the UK government is even thinking about, shifting the power, because oftentimes we don't sit in these spaces where these conversations are being had.